Bram stops at the third pylon every morning. Not the second, not the fourth. The third, the one with the stress fracture running diagonal from the base, the one the Kethvari maintenance crew has been meaning to replace for 6 years. He stops there and he sniffs the fracture for about 12 seconds, and then he sits and looks out at the dock ring for a while before we continue. I have never been able to explain this to him. I have tried. He is not listening. The compound sits on the outer spoke of Station Veth 5, a joint-use arrangement between the Kethvari sovereignty and a handful of human contractors who do logistics consulting for the Coalition Freight Network. There are 11 of us. There are 407 Kethvari. The garrison occupies the inner compound, the barracks block, and most of the recreation wing. We occupy 3 offices, a shared canteen, and a set of residential pods in the annex off the south walkway. It is not, by any reasonable standard, an equal arrangement. This does not bother me. I am 68 years old and I have stopped being bothered by things that are not worth the effort. Bram is 10. He has a gray muzzle and a black patch behind his left ear that has gone silver at the edges this past year, and he weighs 38 kilograms and he has to take a joint supplement in his food every morning or he gets stiff in the back left hip. None of this stops him. I used to think his pace had slowed. I have revised that assessment. His pace is deliberate. There is a difference. I brought him to Veth 5 when I took the posting. The compound administrator, a compact gray-scaled Kethvari named Veth Selm, reviewed his papers and then looked at Bram for a long time with both sets of eyes, and then looked at his papers again and asked me what classification he was assigned under. I said he was a pet. Veth Selm wrote down pet, and the expression on her face suggested she had written down something she did not fully believe. The garrison noticed him on the third day. Not in a threatening way, the Kethvari are a martial culture, but they are not reckless about unknown variables, which is something they have in common with Bram. They watched from the upper walkway while we did the south perimeter. Bram did not look up. He already knew they were there. By the second week, 2 of the garrison's patrol officers had started appearing at the south walkway access point at 600. Not in our way, off to the side. Watching, I nodded at them. They did not nod back. This was fine. Bram paused at the corner junction, did his usual survey of the dock ring approach, and then walked on. One of the officers took out a notation pad. I did not ask what she was writing. The incident with the patrol hound happened on a Tuesday, 22 days into the posting. The Kethvari garrison keeps 2 Sovrath-class patrol hounds, large, 6-limbed animals that top out around 90 kilograms, built for confinement clearance, and what I understand is loosely translated as enthusiasm. They are, by the garrison's own assessment, the most dangerous biological assets on the station. Their handler, a Kethvari officer named Veth Shodun, keeps them on a double-locked mag lead and does not let them near the annex corridor. This has been the arrangement since we arrived. On the 22nd day, 1 mag lead failed. The hound came around the south corner at approximately 9 kilometers an hour while Bram and I were standing at the junction point. It was big and it was loud, and it had not had its morning run yet. Bram turned to look at it. He did not stop wagging. The wag slowed, the way it does when he is paying close attention to something. He looked at the hound for approximately 4 seconds. Then he sat down. The hound stopped at about 4 meters out. Its noise stopped with it. Its head went down, then its shoulders. It sat. Not commanded, Veth Shodun was still 20 meters back, running, shouting the recall. The hound sat on its own, all 6 limbs tucked, and it looked at Bram with what I can only describe as attention. Bram looked back at it for another 3 seconds, and then looked at me. I said, "Good boy." Bram's tail did 1 slow wag. The hound made a small sound I had not heard it make before, a very quiet sound. Veth Shodun arrived, breathing hard, took 1 look at his hound sitting voluntarily at the feet of a 10-year-old Labrador retriever with a gray muzzle and a bum hip, and then very carefully clipped the lead back on. He did not speak. He walked his hound back to the garrison block. He looked back once at Bram before the door sealed. He filed a report that afternoon. I know this because Veth Selm came to find me at dinner. I told her what happened. She asked if Bram had used any recognized suppression signaling. I said no. He had looked at the hound and sat down. She asked what kind of training this represented. I said it did not represent any specific training. It was just what he does when he decides a thing is handled. She looked at Bram, who was lying under the bench beside my feet with his chin on my boot. She took a note. I watched her write it. After that, there were 4 officers at the South Walkway access point at 600. The watches rotated on a 7-day cycle. I learned this only later. At the time I thought it was a coincidence that different officers appeared on different mornings. It was not a coincidence. Veth Selm had assigned the observation schedule through the garrison duty roster. She had given it a project designator. The project designator was not shared with me. At the end of the 6th week, Subcommander Vale Korathsen came to my residential pod. He was senior garrison, tall for a Kethvari, with the collar rank of a field operations commander, and he carried a bound document approximately 12 pages long. He presented it to me with both hands, which I understood to be a formal gesture. I thanked him and read the title page. It said, Ground Assertion Protocol 1, a codified study of the human handler's perimeter methodology, developed under direct observation, Station Orvath 5, Joint Compound Annex South. Compiled under the authority of Subcommander Vale Korathsen, in collaboration with observer officers save Thakan and Verath Selmdun, see appendices. I read the first 3 pages. They described in precise military language the route Bram and I walk every morning, the timing, the pace, the stop at the 3rd pylon, the junction survey, the dock-ring assessment at the north corner, the way Bram moves through narrow corridors with his shoulder angled to cover the left approach while I walk right. There was a full diagram. There were footnotes. Page 4 had a subsection titled The Pause Methodology, Pylon 3, with a theory about stress fracture monitoring and perimeter structural integrity. Bram had been sniffing a crack in the wall because it smelled interesting. This had now been formally theorized as a structural assessment technique. I read as far as page 7, which covered what they were calling the voluntary cessation protocol, Bram sitting down at the junction point after the hound incident, and the 17 tactical notes it had generated. Subcommander Korathsen was watching me. I looked up. He asked if the document accurately reflected my methodology. I told him it did, to the letter. He appeared satisfied. He told me it had been transmitted to Kethvari Joint Forces Command 2 days prior for integration review. He said they had already requested a follow-up study on what the document referred to as the hound suppression engagement and whether it could be replicated at scale. I said I thought replication would depend heavily on the individual dog. He wrote that down. Bram was sitting in the corridor behind me. He had wandered out when the door opened, the way he always does when there is someone new to assess. He looked at Subcommander Korathsen for a while, then at me, then walked back inside and lay down. The subcommander watched him go. I noticed the pause in his breathing, the small stop that the garrison officers get when Bram does something ordinary and unremarkable, and they process it as something else entirely. The next morning we went out at 600, same as always. Bram stopped at the 3rd pylon, took his 12 seconds, sat and looked at the dock ring. The approach was clear. It is usually clear at that hour, but he looked anyway, the way he always looks, unhurried and complete. 2 Kethvari officers stood at the South Walkway access point. They were standing at full attention, not watching casually the way they had for 6 weeks, standing straight, hands at their sides, in what I recognized as garrison formal posture. I did not say anything, neither did they. Bram finished his survey, stood and looked at me. "Good boy," I said. We walked on. The 2 officers fell in behind us at about 12 meters. They matched pace and stayed there for the full south perimeter and through the junction and around the north corner to the dock ring, where Bram sat for a moment in the early light, his tail moving slow, and looked out at the stars. It was, I thought, a very good walk. It always is.